Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending the Williamson County Board meeting. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we're going to start with recording attendance. And Josh will be here late.
We have 11 board members present.
Thank you. And Mr. Brown will be here. He'll be just a little bit late. I want to first acknowledge Deputy Randy Purcell. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. And we're going to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. And board member Ms. Clements is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And she's going to follow the Pledge of Allegiance with a moment of silence. But she's going to start that moment of silence with a short prayer in acknowledgement of the victims of the Covenant School shooting today, as long as the board members do not have any objection to her doing so.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father God, your word tells us that you comfort the brokenhearted. And we are brokenhearted tonight. The community is brokenhearted. And we just ask that you be close to those grieving families of the victims. They could feel your presence in them. It's your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you all. You can be seated. The first item on our agenda is items of particular public interest. This is where we invite members of the public to come and speak with us. Each member of the community is allotted 3 minutes, and we have, let's see here, about 9 members of the community on the agenda tonight. I'm going to call these members up in order of the signups in pairs of 2. You can just be ready if your name is called second. The first person on the agenda is Lindsay Hornick, and the second is Harper Fitzgerald. So Ms. Hornick, you can come on up. And you'll notice that the time is up on the screen for you to pace yourself. Thank you. Yeah, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Hornick, and I'm a senior at Franklin High School. Being that this is the end of my senior year, I have to ask, how do you expect us to go into college without having read mature things? How do you expect underclassmen to eventually take AP classes without being prepared for mature conversations? High school is supposed to prepare us for a real world, a world that isn't protected by the Wilco bubble. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer is a 9/11 story written through the perspective of a 9-year-old boy. This novel is especially important because current high schoolers were not yet born during the 9/11 attacks. This novel therefore allows us to empathize and understand grief. However, this novel is being challenged for sexual content. Let me assure you that if high schoolers are wanting to look up sexual content, it's just a tap away on their phones. I can bet you that teenagers see more graphic content on Instagram or even in their spam emails than they have ever read in a high school library book. This year, at 18 years old, an adult, I had to have my mom sign off for me to read Beloved for my outside reading circles in my AP literature class. Beloved by Toni Morrison, if you haven't read it, is a novel about the physical and psychological stresses of slavery. And it took me to emotional places that I had never been before. It had an immense impact on me and my friends who read it with me. This book also has themes like mother-daughter relationships, community, love, and grief, which is especially important considering the horrific events of today. All of these things apply to real lives, and they will be used in college-level courses. So today, I'm asking you to hear us, the students. I'm asking you to be an administration for the students instead of one for the parents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Harper Fitzgerald, and then Haley Jaworski.
Hi, my name is Harper Fitzgerald, and I am a junior at Franklin High School. I am against the banning of books and believe the content that this county is attempting to ban must be discussed. I understand the desire to be involved in your children's education. However, this is public education, and it is wrong to bar other children from content that you personally deem inappropriate. Educating your child on personal values should not block them for personal exploration in a safe environment. Banning books for violence and sexual content is a gateway for banning books that you just blatantly make you uncomfortable. Conversation can then lead to productive discourse. If these topics make you uncomfortable, then I think you should explain that to your child instead of taking them away from everyone. In my sophomore year during the Holocaust unit, we read the book Night by Elie Wiesel. The novel has similar content to some of the books you all are attempting to ban. The questions and conversations that spurred from this book were crucial to fully comprehending the history and importance of the matter. Not only are students able to build a stronger understanding of what others have gone through, but students can gain empathy for the victims of these events. Through learning about horrific events, us students can better understand firsthand accounts and perspectives. These topics must be talked about in an educational and safe way. Banning these books would prevent that from happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Haley Jaworski, and then Joel Busboom.
Hello, my name is Haley Jaworski, and I'm a senior at Franklin High School, and I am 100% against banning books in our public high school libraries. The library should be a place where kids feel safe and free to explore. It is not a place that the school board should be restricting and censoring. Shouldn't we try to expose our children to sensitive topics while they're still under our roofs, a safe environment, and can discuss the content with trusted adults, rather than waiting for them to be blindsided by it when they're off in the world? Barring students from reading books simply because they contain content that makes you uncomfortable is selfish, and it puts our students at a disadvantage as they start taking AP, IB, and college classes where mature content will be discussed. My AP Lit teacher always says that if you're reading and come across something that makes you uncomfortable, your first instinct cannot be to ignore it or censor it. You have to ask yourself why the author felt the need to include it and how it contributes to the overall meaning of the work. This is critical thinking. I attend a high-achieving school in a high-achieving district. I know there are many students like me who have been reading at a 12th grade level since 3rd or 4th grade. Kids who may get bored with books written for their age group. Would you rather we read books marketed as adult with slightly mature content that we're going to encounter anyway, or that we don't read at all? Because that's the alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel Busboom, and then Celeste Hicks Jeanleger.
Thank you.
Yes, after him. Thank you.
Mine was about transparency on ELA, and I was going to tell my story a little bit, and so I think it's interesting that this is all happening, which is a good example of like what I had to go through because I didn't know what my kid was reading. My kid's in 6th grade, so I wanted to know, and so I went to the ELA teacher, and she's like, "It's on Schoology," so we tried messing around with that and couldn't get to it, and the other dads that I'm friends with, Girl Scout dads, we're like trying to figure it out, and then went to the we go to Hillsborough, so Principal Bohr, he kind of brought in the ELA district lady, and then I ended up with Miss Jenny Lopez, and she was awesome. So she understood it. She's like, let's figure this out. If you actually go under scope and sequence, you'll see that it just has topics. It actually doesn't have the books. I believe they actually just opened it up for the secondary to actually see what the readings are. So she did that. And so my part of it kind of goes to what, you can see how much frustration these kids have. Like, I'm talking about the transparency, not the content, is that we just don't see it. So as parents, we don't see it. And then, like, I went to him and I said, what's going on? He's like, well, you find a book, let me know. I was like, well, you should be able to see it. You're in here. So it's just that question of, like, why is it, like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be doing this, but why did I have to go all the way to Miss Lopez to find out what is going on? And she was great, but, like, whose job is that? Is kind of my question, because this is what happens, as people get frustrated about what they're reading. And honestly, I read that your email today about the shooting. You look at that and it's about feelings, and you can see the emotion that comes from these kids. But, like, parents are like that too. We don't know what's being taught. So, like, just the transparency piece of it, like that email, I was like, this could almost be put as like an ELA email of, like, here's the resources that you've got, so at least you can have a conversation, and I can have a conversation with my kid. But when we're blind on so much of what's going on, like, I just question, like, whose job was it? Because it wasn't my job to get with Miss Lopez to do it, but you all work together. And transparency, and I can't believe how much of a deal this is. ELA is the third rail. We know that. So then to not have transparency on it, like, I think really need to question, like, let's take a step back and say, we got to help parents and the kids see what we're reading so that we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you. Elise Hicks Ginlinger. And then after Celise, then we'll have Warguel Ginlinger.
A tag team duo? Okay. So I guess I just wanted to start because I've been so emotional. I had a whole thing typed up, but today was a bad day, and I just want to just say that I'm so sad that 3 kids lost their lives today, and as a mom, it's just a rough day. So my husband is going to tap in here before I start crying.
My condolences to the families and friends who may have been connected to the heinous acts that happened today. However, this act proves that violence knows no gender. It is not sexist in the way it chooses the mindset of people around the world. Boys and girls have thoughts of violence, and many are prone to act upon those thoughts. We can no longer be pacific in how we deal with the intentions of violence. The bullies can no longer be masked by the sentence in FERPA that delineates privacy. That sentence goes, and the right to have some control over the disclosure of personally identifiable information from the education records. This is the statement that causes the victimization of the victim once again. The school has used FERPA as the blockade to provide any information that would allow the parents of the victim any peace of mind. The student that was the aggressor is allowed more protections at the school than the victims of their actions. Parents of school-age children should not have to wonder if the school is doing anything to protect their child. The school has taken the FERPA Act and tried to use it as a shield to yield any constructive progression. I was not asking if the bully was expelled. I was not asking if the bully was given some sort of out-of-school suspension. I was not asking about the bully's consequences. I wanted to know a concise plan of action that would allow me to feel comfortable in the school's response to such a hateful note. Instead, the sentence mentioned above blocks me from that comfort. I was looking towards the school to aid in my efforts to put in a no-contact order. Instead, that same school sent me on a goose chase that would eventually lead to an SRO who could care less about the predicament. FERPA is used as a sleight of hand or distraction to keep parents from getting to the core of the issue, which is the protection of our children. It was never intended to protect bullies. The rule of FERPA is well intended for parents who are trying to get the best of their children, but has been twisted for insidious tactics to keep parents from understanding exactly how their child is being protected. The silliness of the situation is 9 times out of 10, the victim knows the aggressor. So protecting that information is useless and baseless. If the victim decides to share the name, as said previously, you only victimize the victim and their family. I know my son didn't have any classes with this young lady. I know they did not share the seating on the same bus. However, that knowledge was mine before I had the first meeting with the school officials. Because I speak with my son and provided the answers. So providing me an email that says the same thing to me does not fill me with any kind of satisfaction that you have given any type of thought into how you will make
We were on the
sure.
news today, and we will continue to be on the news if bullying is not addressed.
So,
Thank you. Next, we have Jeff Bork and then Corey Martin.
Hi. Always afraid I'm going to hit my head on these monitors. My heart is heavy as well. Thank you for your words. I do want to thank anyone in the room who's had anything to do with the safety precautions of the buildings themselves in Williamson County. Today, I took great comfort in knowing that those were in place. So, thank you. I haven't personally read the 4 books that the county has been recently evaluating. It's my understanding that there is content in them that some parents wouldn't want their kids to read. And I get it. I'm a parent of 3 Williamson County students, and I know the frustration that comes with the never-ending questions, especially from my middle schoolers. Can I watch this? What about this? Please don't look at Common Sense Media, Dad. Please just let me watch. So, it's hard on the nerves. I understand. But I get to make those choices for my kids. It's the same with our school libraries. If I don't like that my child can check out a particular book, I contact the librarian of the school and have them restrict my child from checking it out. What I'm 100% not okay with is the creation of pathways and precedents where other parents who have different parenting styles and worldviews than I do, and who have not been hired to check out books that have already been systematically vetted by the professionals our schools have hired to do that very job. I'm grateful that the committee did their hard work and decided to keep these books in the schools. However, I believe that such committees are a complete waste of the limited energy and time our elected officials have to deal with the much more pressing issues facing our schools. I would bet that if you talk to students and teachers about how much time this elected body and our administration is spending on this subject, they would stare back in disbelief at the utter disconnect between this whole discussion and the actual problems that they face in the classrooms every day. I'm all for increasing parental involvement in our children's education. When my middle schoolers read something that opens their eyes to something different or alarming about the world, they talk to me about it. I get involved. I don't want my child to get blindsided out there, as one of the high schoolers said. I want safe environments, like a story in a library book, to prompt these kinds of conversations and discussions that I want to have with my kids about these hard things. So, next month, please do not vote to require parental consent for any books in our libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. Corey Martin, and then we have Kate Keese as our final speaker. Thank you.
Jeff's very tall. Thanks, Madam Chair. Since last month, I read Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. And it was not, as I suspected, a book about how my 4-year-old wakes me up in the morning. It was, in fact, a book about trauma. And at last month's meeting, the books that you discussed seemed to have that theme in common, trauma. And you guys even talked about it without naming it. You talked about how it was a benefit to the students to experience these traumatic events vicariously through literature, right? And how it allowed them to process this trauma in a safe environment through literature in their home or in their classroom with folks who care about them and love them in a safe way. Personally, I have not experienced trauma like these characters have. I mean, nobody gets through this life unscathed, but like these fictional characters have gone through some special kind of hell. Our neighbors up north off of Hillsborough Road experienced a fresh hell today, a fresh hellish trauma. I have some friends who are counselors there on site to help the folks who are victimized by this trauma, to help them process this. And I'm grateful for their service. And these counselors know how to communicate with these traumatized people because they have experienced this trauma vicariously and sometimes personally. But that allows them the experience to be able to communicate with these trauma victims more effectively and more effectively. This may seem like a topic switch, but it's not, I promise. I'm really glad that we offer foreign language classes in our schools. They offer our students words and experiences to be able to communicate with other folks in this world who have had different life experiences than them. These books do the same thing. It gives them words. It gives them patterns to follow to be able to empathize with folks who've been through these traumatic experiences. And we know that changing to an opt-in situation instead of an opt-out situation is tantamount to a restriction. So I would ask you, please do not restrict these books. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Kate Keese.
As many have said, our hearts are really heavy tonight. You all serve, and we all gather here, month after month, to ensure that we are doing our best to keep all the children of Williamson County Schools safe and prepared for their futures. This is the task we must continue to keep before us and be mindful that we should always have the same sense of urgency about it that we are feeling this evening. To that end, I wanted to address the suggestion that arose during last month's meeting and has been the topic of so many comments tonight, requiring parental permission for 4 particular books. I share the desire to protect our children, but I do not think it is the responsibility of this board to limit my children's access to information. The point of education is to provide as broad access to information as possible. It is my job as the parent to help my children make sense of what they learn. That's my job. Ideas may be difficult, but I do not believe they constitute the kinds of threats from which we need to protect our children. We have a process in place by which books can be reviewed. We followed that process. It worked. I love a process. It is not possible to create a system by which every book can be evaluated and rated. We have attorneys on staff. We don't need to hire more. I guess there are many different ideas about what is required to keep kids safe. Some that seem obvious to me are clearly not shared by many because school shootings like the one in Nashville today keep happening. I think all our kids are safer when they know that they are valued and cared for, no matter who they are or how they dress or what color skin they have. When all children know that the adults in their lives actively care for them, when the adults are willing to have conversations about difficult things, then they feel safe. Let's not spend more time trying to protect our children from books or from the more difficult pieces of our country's and our world's histories. Let's keep our children safe by providing safe, stable, nurturing communities and by letting them know that it is safe for them to talk to us about everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to everybody who came to speak with us tonight. That concludes our public comment section of the agenda. And next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Thank you. Is that Mr. Welch? Okay. Mr. Haw seconds. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Oh, it was Mr. Haw. Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Welch. Okay. We can cast our votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. And with a unanimous vote, we approved the agenda for the evening. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Mr. Wimberly and Mr. Mitchell seconds that motion. Do we have any requests for comment? Okay, let's move to vote.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. With the votes, we approved the February 2023 school board meeting minutes, the board policies for second reading, 1.703 school attendance areas, zoning and non-resident, the 4.406 policy for use of the internet, the board policy for deletion for second reading with the use of electronic mail, and the recommendation for field trip fee requests. The next item on the agenda is communications to the board. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Board, for being here. And I want to thank the individuals in the audience for being here as well, especially for the speakers tonight, students especially, board members. I think you know, we've had many conversations. Every time one of our students speaks to us, it carries some weight and some power. So thank you, students, for sharing. I do want to emphasize in that context that all our websites do have a link to our library books, and all the library books can be found at each school's website. Communicating every item that every teacher teaches continues to be a work in progress, and sharing those both on the website and through Schoology and through conversations between teachers and students. And I want to thank the folks for making comments related to the decisions that you all will be making in April regarding those items that you discussed last month. But ladies and gentlemen, what is really on my heart is the tragedy at the Covenant School on the campus of a Covenant Presbyterian Church just a few miles from us. It's consumed so many lives, and it's consumed ours. The education family feels that loss, and it's weighing on us. It's a fear that we work on and think about every single day. And I know that those individuals who experienced that direct loss today have had those same thoughts. And our heart goes out to them, and I thank you all for the prayers that you've been sharing on behalf of those families who suffered that loss. In light of that, we had some items on the agenda, some of our student, staff, and school spotlights for some celebrations, and I'll just tell you it's not appropriate for us to celebrate tonight. Many of our families are suffering loss from the close relationships they have with some of those families who've lost children, lost loved ones in that school shooting. And so with that, I'm keeping my message short tonight. Certainly encourage you to go back and look at our work session, but I just remind you of the love that all educators have for the children that we serve, and ask that you all again continue to keep those families in your prayers and everyone who chooses to serve children. So with that, Madam Chair, that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Golden, and I could not have said it better myself, so I will not. Thank you very much. And I will skip the board chair report with that as well. Next item on the agenda is new business. The first item for new business is the approval of the 2023-2024 school budget. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item is the General Purpose School Fund. Just as a reminder, we have a responsibility under a private act for Williamson County to provide our proposed budget to the county government before April 1st. We go through this process with our budget. We have presented at the work session, and actually about, I think, 2.5, 3 weeks ahead of that, we sent you an email with some detail of the general purpose school budget. For the first time in the 18 years or so that I've worked to some degree or another on the budget, on paper right now it includes a deficit. Just as a reminder, it's because the state is switching its funding formula from BEP to TISA, and this is the first year. TISA is a new model that's based on student funding. We know that a lot of it depends on how much funding actually gets placed into the state share. We are told by the Tennessee Department of Education that they project they will let us know the projection for how much the state will fund this budget by May 1st. We have a responsibility to get the budget to the commission before April 1st. So we do have that budget that we discussed in more detail at the work session, and thank you all for the questions you've asked related to it. I certainly open to any questions you may have beyond that work session discussion we had and the conversations we had prior to that. Ms. Farmer is here as well, but I do recommend approval of the budget as is, knowing that depending on what the state does, there's a possibility we might need to come back and do some amendments perhaps in May.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Welch and Mr. Wimberly seconds. And we'll open the floor. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jason, just to maybe get a little more clarity on your, excuse me, your previous comment. If the budget is submitted to the county commission and it comes back to us with their changes, well, maybe I should ask it differently. Will it come back to us with their changes, or will it come back to us for us to make changes and then go back to them for a final pass?
So from a process standpoint, the county commission, and I'm actually going to call on Bobby as well. He may add some detail about that based on his knowledge. The county commission makes a decision on our budget as, in essence, a yes or no. They have some committees. The education committee, the budget committee discusses ours and other departments' budgets, but they are scheduled in June to vote on our budget. If they reject our budget, it could come back to the board for a vote, potentially to amend based on that county commission vote. So that's the schedule. They could reject it. As I understand it, they don't have the power to line item the budget. They could just either accept it or reject it.
So theoretically, we could amend our original submission before they make a final vote, before they make any vote on it.
And I'm not sure your microphone works, so I'm going to repeat your question. I think you said in essence that we could, based on that schedule, potentially make an amendment even before they make their final vote. That's correct.
Mr. Wimberly?
Mr. Golden, for the benefit of people who are observing, and we did talk about this a good bit in the work session, what are the limitations that we were given in creating this budget? Also, are there new initiatives in the budget? And if you could also address pay raises.
Thank you, Mr. Wimberly. So number one, county government, usually through the mayor's office, makes a recommendation for us and in essence, a directive to departments in county government. So we're not a department of county government. We're a separate entity. So every year there are some parameters typically set out from county government, largely through the mayor's office, and it might be something like, and it did include this, no new programs. Sometimes that's a parameter. Often there's a parameter related to pay raises. So to answer your question, do we have anything new? No, we do not have any new programs in this year's budget. And I'll give you two main reasons why. We've touched on one already. It's the new funding model where we're not sure about our total funding, and it's not wise to spend something based until we determine where we're at. But second, it's more substantive. We're going through the strategic planning process right now. We had 18 separate stakeholder meetings, and ultimately we plan to present a draft strategic plan to you in May for vote. And my expectation and my vision for this is we look at those goals that you all established through our strategic plan to lead the question about where we go from here. So it's not the time for us to initiate new programs this year as we have those two variables. Mayor Anderson actually set a standard for his county government departments to submit a proposed budget with what he described as a 5% raise in July and a 2% raise in January. We studied that, and we know that a big reason for that is the increased cost of living that we're experiencing in the community related to housing and, of course, consumer goods. And so our proposed budget actually includes a 6% raise in July without an address of the January 1st. So if you do the math, 5% in July on a July 1 fiscal year budget and 2% in January is the budget equivalent of 6% in July. So we are recommending 6% in July for a couple of reasons there. One is it gets the money to our staff quicker than that wait till January. Second, just the flat logistics of managing mid-year raise. Our teachers are on a 10-month calendar, but they're paid on a 12-month scale. And so some of their income is deferred just a little bit, and that deferral increases through the school year until the summer. The calculation from our payroll department to make those changes for each individual teacher is a lot of individual data entry. So the wise thing to do is to just recommend a raise for our staff on July 1. It's a lot of detail to answer your questions, but thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got Jason, can you do a kind of an overview? We're $37 million more this year than last year. And I'm seeing like 15, possibly 18 million for raises and whatnot. Where is all the extra money going? I think that's something that our constituents need to hear.
Sure. And number one, for the constituents out there, I want to refer them to our work session agenda packet. Rachel Farmer had a PowerPoint with one slide that actually gave that detail. And to answer your question here at this meeting, I would like to ask Ms. Farmer if she would speak to that, to those increases.
The 37 million that we have increased, I'll just give you line by line kind of a breakdown of what that's made out of. Classified adjusted chart with a 6% raise was 3.8 million. The professional chart with a 6% raise is 11.7 million. Every year, as our teachers increase in experience, their chart rolls with years of experience. So that particular role is a $3.5 million increase. We also increased some lines that were not on the pay charts themselves for substitutes, tutoring, supplements, stipends, overtime, all of those additional pay categories. That's a $7 million increase. Advanced degrees, teachers that are currently have a BS and working on a master's, or a master's working on an EDD or PhD. We have $400,000 allocated for any of those that would have that bump. We have existing interventionists that are currently being paid out of our ESSER funding that would be moved into GP, which is $2.3 million. Additions for new schools, we're opening 2 new schools, and so certain positions have to be added even though we resize existing schools. There's certain positions, a nurse, a principal, a bookkeeper that every school has to have. So that's $3.8 million. Required and growth additions, again, our system is still growing, and so we do have growth again, and that's $5.1 million. And then there were some new positions or adjustments that we did feel like strongly needed to be added, and that's $3.3 million. Operation expenses decreased by $4 million overall. All of that to say the summation of that is the $37 million.
Thank you for that, Ms. Farmer. Let me give you a little bit more detail on the revenue side. The property tax rate for Williamson County was at $2.22 back in 2021. It dropped in 2022, $1.88. And it's been that same this year. We don't intend to ask for an increase in that rate. Our projections for this budget includes it being covered by TISA, and any increases in the actual revenue, sales tax increases, et cetera. So the variable that could impact this budget coming back to you is if, in fact, the TISA funding does not total a sufficient amount to make the budget balance.
Thank you, Mr. Goen, and thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Mr. Wimberly? Did you request to speak again? No? Okay. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we vote on the general budget, school budget, I need to state that I have an immediate family member who is employed by the Williamson County Schools who will be affected by this proposed budget. But my vote this evening is in keeping with my oath of office to fulfill my responsibility as an elected Board of Education member, and my vote will be based upon what is best for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
I, Rick Wimberly, have an immediate family member who is employed by Williamson County Schools who may be affected by this proposed budget resolution. My vote on this budget resolution is nevertheless in keeping with my oath of office to fulfill my responsibility as an elected Board of Education member. Said from memory.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Glenn. Okay. Thank you for your comments, board members, and we can go ahead and cast our votes. Oh, Mr. Golden, you recommend approval?
I do recommend approval.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. With that approval, we did pass the 2023-24 school budget. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the textbook adoption committee recommendation for the math textbooks.
If I may, Madam Chair, that was item A1, General Purpose School Fund.
Approve the rest of the budget, huh? Okay, let's back it up and go to the Central Cafeteria Fund, part of the budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have the General Central Cafeteria Fund item as the next agenda item. Just as a reminder, this is a self-contained budget that is self-funded. There are no county tax dollars used in the Central Cafeteria Fund. We rely on purchases plus funding from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Do recommend approval of that budget. Certainly open to any questions you may have related to it.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Welch? And a second by Ms. Apriya. Thank you. Do we have any discussion? No discussion? We can cast our votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
You. And with that vote, we approved the Central Cafeteria Fund. Next item on the agenda is the Extended School Program Fund.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our third of 4 proposed budgets includes what we call SAC, our Extended School Program Fund, the School-Age Child Care Program. That likewise is a self-funded program that does not take any county tax funds. It is funded by usage along the lines of a traditional business. We do have on page 63 of our budget line some increases in the fees, largely to cover increases in expenses related to our SAC program. With that, we do recommend approval for the Extended School Program Fund.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Cash? And a second from Mr. Mitchell. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, let's cast our votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. Your vote just approved the Extended School Program Fund, or SAC. Last item under budgets is capital requests. Mr. Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Annually, we make capital requests for significant maintenance work, for safety and security issues, and for some of our computers and networking programs. I do want to point out that we also have a 5-year capital plan that includes some of our largest projects, substantial renovations of buildings, large technology purchases, et cetera. What you are looking at today for our budget vote is our annual capital request that tend towards maintenance issues such as roof replacements, HVAC repairs, security camera repairs and related safety issues, and some of our smaller replacement programs for technology. On the technology point, I know we've had some questions related to this, so I want to make sure that you all have a clear understanding. Starting in 2024, we project that the Chromebook purchases that we made 3 and 4 years ago will come up, and we're going to have to replace a large number of Chromebooks. Those are on our 5-year capital plan. The devices that we have included in this particular budget include smaller numbers. We actually piloted that program at Brentwood Middle and Independence. We propose to replace those with this budget, plus some replacement of damaged devices, plus devices for growth. So with that, I do recommend approval of this capital request that we will then take to the commission.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Mr. Mitchell, and a second by Ms. Apria. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, we have some discussion. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golden, the purchase of Chromebooks was done during the time pandemic when we were anticipating the need to run the district completely remote and online. And prior to that, we did not basically have a policy to provide technology or Chromebook for every child in the district. And so we were kind of forced into that as a way to, from my memory, correct me if you think you remember otherwise, but we were kind of forced into that policy basically by the pandemic itself. Why are we looking to continue the policy of providing technology Chromebooks to every student in the district?
Thank you for the question. Number one, in this current budget, that's not in there. So I want to make sure that we all understand that for this particular vote. But to answer your question more fully about Chromebooks, we were headed down the road towards the possibility of every student having a device. Prior to COVID, we had actually piloted assigning a device, in this case Chromebooks, $325 per unit, relatively inexpensive compared to a traditional laptop, to all the students in Independent High School and Brentwood Middle. You notice that we have high school and middle school in that pilot. Because of COVID, we did speed up that process. I talked about down the road, we hit the gas a lot faster than we originally intended to as a result of COVID hitting. Prior to that, one of the most significant regular gifts we received from our PTOs was laptops at most of our elementary schools. And so there were many, many laptops at all our elementary schools, not fully one-to-one everywhere, but we were able to fill in that gap more quickly. Right now, and as we prepare for next year, we have started pretty detailed discussions, data gathering on how our youngest grades use those devices and evaluate whether there's that need for us to continue to have that assignment. And it's going to include some discussions with some of the PTO leaders. Would they view that as going backwards, where they still feel an obligation to donate devices? You all remember we used to talk about one of our favorite acronyms years ago, COWS, Computers on Wheels. Which would include racks on wheels that would be in the library and then rolled out to particular classes. We've evolved some. The demands for online access, even testing sometimes from the state, are some issues that we're evaluating. So short answer is we're not sure we're there yet with how many we're going to recommend in a year, but we're going to spend this time to evaluate that, especially at the youngest grades.
Mr. Galbraith?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Jason, just, I don't remember us talking specifically about this at the work session, but especially in light of the events of today, I guess it's a good time to reflect and ask what kind of safety and security needs are there that that we're not addressing in the budget. In this budget are some security cameras, some locks on doors primarily, as if I'm looking at this right, but to the tune of about $2.1 million. I'm not asking to increase this budget, but maybe over the course of your discussions with the county commission, to see what their appetite is for. I'd like to be prepared with some additional, if we so choose collectively, the board and the commission so chose to pull forward some of these things if we think we could operationalize it quicker. There's no use in spending money faster than you can handle getting boots on the ground and getting everything implemented. But so just interested to see what was left on the table when you looked at Fletch's request, because I know it's more than this.
Thank you for that, and you're right. By the time any budget makes it to you, we've had some discussions and prioritized and analyzed some of the issues with contractors. You're right. It's largely camera replacements and door locking mechanisms. Let me give you a couple of specifics, and anybody who walks up to one of our schools sees this, especially those who've looked at our schools the last few years. Every one of our schools has a camera access point with what I think of as a solenoid. I know that's an ancient term, but you push the button, it releases the hammer to allow folks to come in with a camera. Folks identify themselves, show their ID. We determine that they're appropriate for entry. Part of this budget includes increasing the locations at the buildings for some of those. So you think about high schools with multiple buildings. We make sure that we have that camera system at every building, but there are some requests to allow a more facilitated entry point rather than the doors being locked. And our standard is every single door is locked. And so if a student moves from one place to another, then you have somebody physically at the door to make sure that gets open. That's a piece of it. There's an old saying that you can never have enough cameras, and that's true for us as well. So our safety team analyzes the locations. Some of it is replacement for the existing cameras. Some of it is, are there any particular spots where there might be a gap in camera coverage that we want to pick up? I'm going to call on Gary Anderson just to add any other detail. One of his areas of responsibility is school safety. Just to put any detail in there that I haven't answered with Mr. Galber's question.
One of the items that is prevalent in this entire West is about key fobs and upgrading the system on that.
Terry's not in charge of microphones.
That's Kevin.
Kevin's is on, if you want to take Kevin.
Okay, thank you. One of the items that's prevalent throughout these requests is updating the key fob system and rekeying the buildings to get them all on the same type system. Another thing is for the traffic controls outside of certain schools that have the flashing lights, is to upgrade those to solar and be able to control those through cellular phones, because sometimes when there's a time change or a power outage or something, some of those things don't get changed and adjusted, but we will have better control over those. The whole thing is built around improving the safety in our schools, and most of it is internal. As you know, that the requirement from the state is that doors be locked and secured and closed, and we want to make sure that all of our doors are upgraded to make sure that they can close efficiently as well. So that's pretty much what the requests are for the safety and security.
I guess so, Jason. If I may, I mean I appreciate the color of what's in the budget. I'd really like to understand what didn't make it and what are the, like, if we're proposing to get doors and hardware replacement for these, 4 elementary schools and three middle schools. Is that a phased approach where there are 15 other schools just like this, that if we had more funds, we could do them all in this upcoming fiscal year rather than waiting and phasing it in our.
From a funding standpoint, the short answer to your question is yes. That is a phasing system for the key fobs. As I sit here, I can't answer about contractors and getting that staffed. But to that point, we'll go back and double check with Mr. Fletcher and see what might be available. You all do know, and I know that it jogged your mind that we do have those times where we're maxing out contractor work. I just don't know the answer to the key fob question as I sit here.
If you don't mind, just prepare that after, not in any hurry, but before your next meeting with the commission. Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Don't have any funding requests for microphones in the capital budget.
Okay, now here we go. So Jay asked my question, but a little bit different question is, in the event that the county commission were to not fund the capital budget fully, have you given thought to what you would cut? And then maybe in light of Jay's question and in light of the events today, would that change your thoughts about what you would cut and maybe prioritizing the safety security components of the budget and to ensure that those got funded?
If I may, let me answer your second question first and your first question second. We thoughtfully work through safety on a daily basis, and then of course at the budget side on an annual basis. And many of our safety measures were put in place because we saw a need and thoughtfully worked towards it over the course of time. Some of those you all funded that we never talked about publicly. So I don't know that this particular event will trigger a different thought, but let me tell you, you think about when the tragedy at Uvalde happened. Most every entity, including law enforcement, went back and did a review of their processes. We likewise did that with the sheriff's department. And one particular item that was reaffirmed in that context was you go to the problem. And in the bit I saw today in the news, that's what happened in Metro Nashville. So is it possible that a review of this tragedy might lead to some evaluation, whether it's a reaffirming of our process or a suggestion for something different? It is possible, and we will do that through a tabletop exercise. As to your first question, I got caught up in answering your second one. I've now forgotten what your first one was.
Really just about whether, if in the event the county commission were to decide not to fully fund the capital request, have you thought about what you would cut?
We have not decided what we will cut because that's not the way we went about setting up the the capital request. We've come to the conclusion that we need this. We have cut other items. If they do cut us, we will have to go back ourselves and have a discussion administratively as a team. We will then have to take it to you to make some recommendations on where we go from here.
Yeah, so the thrust of my question was really, I mean, clearly every day you all are thinking through the safety and security protocols, and really the thrust of the question was more about the capital budget and the items that are in there that are safety and security focused, to maybe put a priority or a preference towards those being funded over other things if the budget were to be cut. Thank you.
Thank you for that suggestion. Our safety analysis is quite broad, and not specifically in a safety context, but in all contexts, we are competing for a limited fund. So thank you for pointing that out.
Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golden, I think we've got a great safety issues and situation in our schools, but there's always a weak link, and nothing's foolproof. And I think one of the weak links when you're in and around the schools, elementary, middle, and high school, are doors being propped open or left open. We've got technology that's pretty readily available to tell someone in the office that the doors are open. I don't know if this is going to help get that passed through, or more technology brought in. I don't know, but it's probably a good time to reconsider that. I know we do safety checks constantly and evaluate everything, but maybe it is time, like Josh and Jay are saying, to get this in the budget.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cash. The doors have been a priority. We at the beginning of this year, I asked our team, faculty, staff, administrators, all operations folks to focus on 3 key points. One of those 3 key points was student safety, and doors were a key. Law enforcement is involved with us on that as well. There's always that possibility somebody runs out and sticks a rock there, and it has been a thoughtfully approached issue throughout this school year. I've seen some growth in that, and we encourage anyone who notices those issues to report them to us. And our SROs are constantly moving around at unpredictable times, actually, and that's one of their many responsibilities. But that's a primary responsibility for our administration. But you're right. There are electronic systems where every single door can be wired to identify that, and that is something that we have been working on as a work in progress. So we'll have a discussion about the total cost for that as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Golden, I guess my question would be, as we're talking about safety protocols that we currently have and gaps that our safety department sees, maybe we can have a presentation from Mr. Fletcher at our next work session over where he sees give us what his risk analysis is.
Certainly. I will tell you that there are some items of our safety protocols that are confidential that we will share with you in a confidential manner. We do not share publicly our full safety plans, and I know you all are sitting here and you know what I'm talking about, because you as board members know some specific safety items that we don't share publicly. So it may be that he shares something with you confidentially.
And I appreciate that and recognize that. I guess I was thinking too, I know that our parents are all concerned as well, and our community above and beyond just the parents. So maybe a presentation at our work session from him or his department and staff would also be something that could be somewhat of a public statement or a public presentation on what Williamson County Schools does to keep our children and staff safe.
Mr. Wimberly?
I guess an FYI that in all of our 18 stakeholder meetings, school safety was mentioned either as a strength of the county, but also as an aspiration to make it even better and defining safety in a variety of ways. And this is kind of, out of line for a board meeting, I think. But would it make sense for us to approve the budget with some more money, a blanket, just an amount of money in the capital request for whatever we may learn in the coming months?
I'm going to think out loud. The county commission has told us, if I'm not mistaken, Rachel, I'm looking at you, that they go to bond market. They will now be going to bond market once a year. These capital requests would be, if approved by the county commission, funded on an annual basis, largely, typically, through going to the bond market. I'm thinking about their schedule. Rachel, am I correct that they would need a bond market approach in October?
Have to have the request from our board September for them in October, and they go to bond market end of October or November.
So with that, Mr. Wimberly, my opinion as I sit here right now is let us put some administrative effort into that and be prepared to come with a thoughtful, detailed approach for the county commission.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Welch?
Not to continue to drag this out, but it seems like we've kind of taken this down the road of school security, obviously, based upon the tragedy that happened today. I guess I just want to say take this opportunity that obviously the incident that happened, the tragedy, I think that crystallizes in people's minds what that event is and start thinking about what would we do and how would we react. But I think it's important for us to remember that we've traditionally looked at our security plan almost as an iceberg. And the majority of that is what you don't see. It's beneath the water. That's the largest part of it. And our plan, the focus of our plan, our ideal, is not focused on what are we going to do when it happens. It is let's stop it before it ever happens. Let's not get to that point where we have to deal with the bad things. Let's nip it in the bud. And so with that, we very much ask our parents to, if they see something, say something to our principals. And I don't want to emphasize that second part, say something to our principals. Don't emphasize rumors on social media and things that you heard secondhand that you aren't aware of. Our principals are the resource for this. Go to them. They have the policies and procedures. They are the ones who can make change. They are the ones who can investigate and take appropriate action. So by all means, be a partner with them. And then the second thing I want to emphasize with this is maximum convenience and school safety are mutually exclusive. It's inconvenient to have to go through the front door when you're trying to drop something off around back and someone could let you in. It's inconvenient to have to show your ID or have to go through background checks to volunteer. But this is how we keep kids safe. So again, please partner with our principals and our building leaders as they exercise this proper authority and these inconveniences that are acceptable in the light of what we're trying to do. And finally, threats are in a lot of ways. We talk about physical threats. There are cybersecurity threats out there. LI Unified School District was held ransom for millions of dollars, refused to pay, and had 2,000 student records released into the dark web. There's a lot of bad things that happen. And we hire national and state and local experts who are aware of these things. And we don't share, as you said, everything that we do, but just because the public may not hear about things, it also doesn't mean that we're not thinking about it, that we're being proactive, that we're not taking actions about these things. We are. It's just if we tell you, we can also be telling the bad guys that look to do us harm, and we don't want to tip our hands. So just because you don't know something doesn't mean it doesn't happen or that we don't care.
Welch, thank you for that last comment. It is an uncomfortable discussion. I don't in any way ever want to even imply that we have this solved. It is a daily effort, and it's a human effort, and it's what you lose sleep over. It's what we lose sleep over. It's what I lose sleep over. I will tell you that one comment I've mentioned in previous public meetings is there's no substitute for people. And that is very true in a safety context. There is no substitute for people. A few years ago, well, when I've been here, this is my 18th year in some role with the district. When I first got here, we had an agreement where we shared the cost with the Sheriff's Department for SROs in our secondary schools. We now, through efforts of you all as a board, our safety team, by the way, we didn't have a safety director back then either. We didn't have a safety department back then. But through efforts, we've added that, where we have dedicated staff members working on that every single day. That's who they are and that's what they do. The Sheriff's Department has SROs in every one of our buildings. A nice thing that we've seen with the county, when they did that, they offered SROs to Franklin Special School District. At the time, City of Franklin provided those SROs. They offered those to private schools as well. The thought being that an integrated, leadership-driven program to protect all schools and protect all students was important to this county. So I want to thank the County Commission. You all talked about County Commission funding. I want to thank the County Commission for the support. It is a full community effort to provide safety for our students. So we're talking about the physical aspects of this, but there's also prevention measures that you all have funded recently, increased school counseling, some of those programs to assist students as needs arise.
I'm sorry, just one more thing to respond to that. That's a great history of it, and I think it'd be an appropriate moment to recognize my friend and colleague Rick Wimberly. I remember when we were doing that at first, and we had half a position budgeted for it, and it was Rick's leadership during that budget meeting that said, well before any of this was in the news, and the foresight to say, no, I think we need a full position budgeted for that, and that's how we hired Mr. Fletcher, who is in my humble opinion, the best security officer in the state for school resources.
Thank you all for your comments and questions. We can proceed to a vote.
The vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. This motion was passed with the full support of the board, and that was for capital requests for 2023-24. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the Textbook Adoption Committee's recommendation for math textbooks. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the time of year, and actually the time officially every 6 years, and for practical purposes, this time every 8 years, where we go through the state adoption process for math textbooks. We spent the last few months having monthly meetings and updates for you on the process. It's a very detailed process that includes you all choosing a committee to make recommendations to you, having community meetings to review the textbooks, have teachers in the content area review and make their preference known, even after the state goes through the textbook selection process. And I got to say this, there's been a change this year at the state level in that the textbook commission, and they have a long name, but I think of it as the Tennessee Textbook Commission, spent a lot of time with the vendors making sure that the items that they selected for us to choose from included all the Tennessee standards. I saw that as a substantial change from prior years. So I don't know that anybody from the state will ever listen to this meeting, but I want to thank them for the work they did on the front end to bring items for us to select. With that, you heard the report from Ms. Lopez at the work session, and do recommend approval of the textbooks as recommended in the board packet.
Mr. Ha and Mr. Welch seconds the motion. Okay. Do we have any discussion? Mr. Galbraith?
I want to thank the county commission for letting us be a guest in their auditorium.
Am I on? Okay. Thank you. Just a point of order, Mr. Cook. If I'm going to make a motion to amend, I make my motion and then it has to get a second, and then do I get to I speak after that, right? Correct. Okay. Thank you. So I would like to amend the motion. Not exactly sure what the motion was, since there wasn't one, I assume, but I'd like to amend the motion to read this way, and everybody got a copy of this before the meeting, but I had to get a couple of edits from Mr. Cook right before that. So I move to accept the Math Curriculum Committee's recommendations with the understanding that for the K to 5 for McGraw-Hill, the committee did not evaluate the alignment of the social and emotional learning SEL components of the curriculum to the Tennessee state standards. Therefore, staff will neither require training nor require teachers to use the SEL components of the curriculum.
Okay, so Mr. Galbraith has put on the floor a motion to amend the current motion, which is to approve the committee's recommendation to adopt the math textbooks. So is that, we need a second, thank you. Okay, Mr. Brown, thank you. Any discussion on Mr. Galbraith's motion? Yes.
Okay, thank you. So just wanted to, did I lose me again? Okay, I'm deaf, so I can't really hear. I wanted to do this, as we talked about this in the work session, but wanted to do this formally with the board meeting. Our staff, Ms. Lopez and Mr. Allen, Dr. Allen, have gone through. We've gone through multiple discussions and presentations about this, about the process, and over the last 2 meetings, directly they have addressed the comments from parents from the review of the books themselves, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jason, I mean I have talked with you, and I've talked with Dr. Allen about ensuring that what I'm asking here is consistent with what you and your team have really on your own have pledged to do, and I just want to make sure that I'm not doing anything that you're not comfortable with.
Thank you for the question. I want to do a double check and read out my understanding of what you described, with the understanding that for the K-5 McGraw-Hill, the committee did not evaluate the alignment of the social and emotional learning components of the curriculum to the Tennessee state standards. Therefore, staff will neither require training nor require teachers to use the SEL components of the curriculum. Is that the essence of it? So just as a reminder, when Ms. Lopez presented to you, she let you know that in the teacher's manual alone, there were some elements, some suggested or included elements of what could be described as social emotional lesson components. Some of them were based on what was described as a math mindset, the idea that if someone's got a concern and they're in essence afraid of math, there might be some techniques for addressing that, and some of them might not have been even that directly related to math. So Ms. Lopez stated what I understand you've restated, that the committee make a recommendation related to the math standards, and we don't intend to require training or provide that training, nor require teachers to use those lessons that are exclusively in the teacher's manual. So for that context, we'll be fine either way. If the board votes for this, it puts in a board motion our intent regardless. So as I understand it, we'll be fine either way, because what you stated is what we intend to do if the board approves the McGraw-Hill K-5.
Thank you for that. And I guess to speak to why I believe we should make this in our motion, as opposed to requiring anyone who had a question about this in the future to have to come back and actually watch the meeting, or well, that's the only way they could actually see it, is to watch a work session or a meeting to understand our intent. I would really just like to make it perfectly clear to anyone who would ultimately try to challenge the board on this, because I mean, that's just where we are. I'd like for it to be made clear to the public and to the staff that this is what's going to happen. Jason's already told us that this is what he's directing his staff to do, so we have no reason to. It's not that I don't trust that he's going to do that. I just want to make it very clear. And if anybody comes back and says, "Well, you guys approved the curriculum by 12-0 like they did with Wit and Wisdom," we can say, yes, we did, and these are the stipulations is a bad word, but this is what staff said in response. It's not like they didn't listen to the constituents who had issues with this, and it's not even that they are necessarily doing this because constituents did this. They're doing this because they think it's the right thing to do, and I do too. And I just want to reflect. I'd like for the board to join me in doing this. Thank you.
Mr. Galbraith, if I may add a little bit of answer to that. What you've articulated is what our TLA team let you all know at the work session they intend to do, regardless. Since we're here, I do want to look over at Dr. Oyer, and just as a double check, if there's any gaps in my response that needs to be filled, I certainly invite them. I don't think the microphone worked there either, but.
Okay.
Please hold. Oh, there it was. No, sir. We will use the curriculum and guide our work in the classrooms based on the Tennessee state standards. And our teachers will continue to build relationships and build a classroom culture that creates students' academic success.
Thank you. Ms. Sapria. Should we touch it when it's time to talk, or just let you control it? Okay, so we don't need to touch our systems. Just in case, I wasn't sure either. So yeah, exactly.
Is it? Okay. Just for the sake of clarity, I wanted to confirm that having this in the motion does not prevent any teachers who find it in their professional judgment to use the SEL component beneficial for their class or their students. That doesn't prevent them from choosing to do that.
That is correct, as I understand it. We talked about a math mindset. Think back to the time when you were in school. Did you hear somebody say, "I'm no good at math," right? Because of blank. So there is an element in the state standards that addresses that, so that teachers have the discretion based upon their particular student group, based upon their particular cohort, to make sure that they have an environment that is conducive to math learning. So that is a key that we do expect of teachers, and that they do need that discretion to do.
Mr. Wimberly?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This feels like a gross overreach to me. We already have the assurances of staff that SEL will not be trained or required. And first of all, I'm not sure what the objection is to it. I haven't heard from anyone complaining. Not to say that people haven't, but I haven't heard that. And it seems to me also that if we are going to put this condition on it, it ought to go through policy. It shouldn't be an amendment to an approval. I mean, the board doesn't regulate through amendments to approval, but this is clearly a regulation. So we ought to take it through policy. And I'm not sure that us saying that teachers have the ability to use it if they want to actually sends a clear message to teachers that we're not trying to tell them how to teach math. Although to some degree we are. The standards tell them how to teach it. But it just seems to me that as I understand what social and emotional learning is, to make those connections between math and society and emotion, to me is a powerful thing. And I can't imagine what topic that we would cover where that would be more important, more needed than math, because students are constantly asking, as I asked, why are we studying this? And why do we have to go through this long process to show our work? Well, there's a reason for that. But to some of us, myself included, I mean, I needed some coaching on, dealing with the emotions of math. I hated it. I kind of like it now, though, oddly enough. But I'm 67 years old, and I've learned the lessons the hard way. So I just think we're overreaching here, and this is not the appropriate way to do this, if indeed it needs to be done. And I'm not convinced that it does need to be done. And I trust our senior staff who have said, in effect, this is what our intention is. And I think one of the comments was, we don't have time to train or require this because the standards are so robust of what we must do by state law. So I'd ask that this motion be defeated. And thanks, Jay, though, for getting it to us in advance. Thank you.
Mr. Ha?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm concerned with some of the discussions around topics like this, whether it's the curriculum or books or library books, where we have the potential to have a chilling effect on the teaching profession. And our actions speak louder than our words. While we may say, we trust the professionals and we trust that staff is going to do this, but we want to put this guardrail in place, or we want to put our thumb on this motion. Essentially, this is a motion to say we're going to do what we said we're going to do. And we didn't do that with the budget. We didn't do that with our other agenda items tonight. We don't typically do that. So is this for a political cover, or is this for some purpose that serves the vision and mission statement of Williamson County Schools? I question whether this is necessary, and I have concerns about setting a precedent where we add more to these things that we typically debate for hours, have many, many questions on, and then ultimately it's a vote that decides it. So that's why I will be voting no against this amendment.
Mr. Ha? Ms. Cleveland?
I don't really see a problem now. The logistics of it, whether it should have been policy or whether bringing an amendment here, that I don't know. I haven't given much thought about that. But I think the key word is required. And we're just reiterating what Mrs. Lopez had already said. And I think to Jay's point, I think we're just clarifying it and just basically making it public. And I don't think it's for political reasons. I think it's more to make an understanding that we did adopt a math book, textbook, but there's a component that we're not adopting. Okay, it's just math. And I know everybody says, just stick to math. And I like the part in this, it says we're not requiring it. but that doesn't mean we're restricting teachers from doing anything. So I think it's more of a clarity of what we're adopting and what we're not adopting. And therefore, I do believe in the motion.
Mr. Welch?
I think Rick makes some excellent points with it and whether or not it's needed. But if we are going to pass it, I would like to amend the motion to make it more clear. And I would like to amend the amendment to change the word nor to neither. And then after the word require, add the words or restrict. So the last sentence would read, therefore, staff will neither require training, staff will neither require training, I said that wrong. Let me walk that back. I'm sorry, I apologize. To add the words or restrict after require. So the final sentence would be, therefore, staff will neither require training nor require or restrict teachers to use the SL components of the curriculum.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Clements, is that okay? Ms. Clements? Do we, she said, yeah, Mr. Priya seconded that. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Clements.
Okay. I just wanted to say I appreciate this. I think for the teachers, it gives them the latitude to make the professional call. And I know that with our other, the ELA curriculum that we approved, that there has been some questions. So I like that this puts us more in black and white. So I do like this motion.
Thank you, Ms. Clements. Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Yes.
Your amendment to my amendment?
That's correct. Yes.
So Eric, I really don't have a problem with that. I just wonder, can you give a little bit of thought to, I don't know how, I'm not sure how that reads. Just when it says, will neither require training nor require or restrict teachers to use. I don't know that says exactly what I understand your thought process. Just thinking about the grammar on that, but require, because I think the thought is we will not require teachers to use it, nor will we restrict teachers from using it. Is that correct? And you're trying to do it in as few words as possible.
Bond, I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you asking me a grammatical question on how it's worded, or are you basing upon what is the gist of the amendment?
I'm asking. Are you actually trying? Is what you're trying to say that we will not require teachers to use it, or restrict teachers from using it? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's accurate.
Okay. Because is there a better way to say that than the way you did? Because I think you're trying to do it in as few words as possible. But right now it says require or restrict teachers to use the SEL components, and I'm not sure that.
So
by combining those two statements.
I think what it would say, therefore, staff will neither require training nor require or restrict teachers to use the SEL components of the curriculum.
That's what I don't know that makes just grammatical sense. I appreciate the thought process of it, but
not an English teacher, but I think it's clear.
I mean, if just
there's
said,
a recommendation to change it up, I'm open to that. I'm not married to that language. I think that, to Rick's point, I think by doing this, we send a message that there is something wrong there, or we're restricting something, which we are not doing. And so I think this just further clarifies it, that it exists, but we're not requiring training, we're not making anyone doing, but at the same time, if the teacher sees value in using those strategies, and frankly, some of the strategies that we saw, it personally made sense to me and I think a few others, then we don't have that block on it. So if there's a recommendation on the language, I would be open to it, but I worry that we're making mountains out of molehills at this point.
Okay, I'll let somebody else try to wordsmith it for me.
As I have it written in my notes from what you said, it says, therefore, the staff will neither require training nor restrict teachers from using the SEL components of the curriculum.
No.
No,
No.
that's not what you're saying. Okay. Can you read it
Staff will
again?
neither require training nor require or restrict teachers to use the SEL component. All that I've added is added the words or restrict after the word nor and before the word require.
Therefore, staff will neither require training nor require or restrict teachers from. Require. Okay. Problem is I don't have my glasses, so I can't see. What do you recommend? How do we do? Josh. Oh, okay. Josh. Yeah, Mr. Brown. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, I'm not going to put words in Jay's mouth, but I think how Jay worded it when he was trying to explain Eric's intent was correct. That adequately explains what I think he's trying to communicate, which is to say the sentence would read, and for it to make sense and be complete, the sentence would read, therefore, staff will neither require training nor require teachers to use or restrict teachers from using the SEL components of the curriculum.
It's 6 one way, half dozen the other to me. If this is a acceptable compromise, I'm fine with changing to that. It says the same thing.
I think it's not a bad addition. What you're suggesting is not a bad addition to the language. It's just to make it clear what it's saying. And I just to add one more comment, I think, the comment's been made about the precedent we're setting or calling into question teachers' professionalism. It's not that at all. We have a responsibility to support our teachers. One thing this is not doing is saying anything other than what Dave Allen and his team have already said they're doing. So it's really reinforcing that. But the other thing I think we have an obligation to do as a board at times is to think about optics, think about and instill confidence in the community or in people who follow curriculum closely, that if there's any doubt, if there's any question about how something's going to go, and we can remedy that with something simple that's not in conflict with what the staff's already said, why wouldn't we do it? I think we learned some lessons, or at least I did, from coming in when I did on the board after ELA and Wit and Wisdom, that probably in hindsight things could have been done differently. This process has been done very well, in my opinion. I've told Dave Allen that. I've told Jenny Lopez that. We had multiple months of meetings. We had presentation after presentation. We were kept in the loop. It was transparent. So this is a way to put, I think, another final finishing touch on the process by just instilling confidence and maybe avoiding some of those questions that may come, and certainly some of the questions that did come in the previous curriculum that we adopted. So I think it's a good suggestion that Jay has brought. I think the amendment is fine that Eric's added, so I'm happy to support it.
Is nodding that she is okay with the amendment change. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say I think we've got a great curriculum. I think the state's done a great job. I think Mr. Allen and Ms. Lopez have went over and above to reach out to folks, grandparents and just alumni and everyone else that came out and about to see what was going on with the curriculum. I think we've done a great job there. But I also, I like the way Ms. Cleveland, expressed herself and Jay and Josh. I think this amendment will be a win-win for everyone. I think what we've learned from wit and wisdom is, we didn't get into it enough. We really didn't. And some didn't appreciate it, some do. It's the same way with this. Some people are gonna like it, some people won't like it. But I think overall, as a community, as a school system, I think this is a win for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Mr. Golden, can we get your final recommendation?
Sure, if I may, let me address one item specifically, and then speak a little bit more generally to the motion. There may be some choices in where a teacher goes in a particular class that's right for that particular class that might not be right for another class based on where they are in learning and understanding particular standards that are being taught. Philosophically, I don't want us to restrict or require teachers to do something that's not appropriate for that particular cohort. With that, I also more generally believe that, to use the phrase legislative history, this discussion alone may be the most valuable thing we do, because there will be a record of this discussion. So ultimately, on my recommendation, I'm going to recommend that you all vote your conscience on this one, and I'm going to leave it on you without a particular recommendation for a yes or no, knowing that we have this legislative discussion and I know what we're going to do administratively. I'm copping out, if that's a...
You're copping out. Okay. All right. Is everyone clear on the amendment that we are voting for? Y'all can repeat that right now.
So I want to offer a point of order here, if I might.
Mr. Mitchell.
We're voting on Eric and Jennifer's amendment to Jay's amendment.
That's correct. That's
Voting
correct.
on the second amendment first.
That's correct. Let me read. Let me read what I blindly, I don't have my glasses tonight, so I'm like, to make sure I can, yeah, thank you. Let me make sure oh God, that's not the right prescription. Okay, thank you for trying. Okay, so I've got, the component that we amended was, therefore staff will neither require training, require teachers to use, nor restrict teachers from using the SEL components of the curriculum. Does that capture intent? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
If Jay has agreed to the changes, then why would there be two votes?
Because you had a second motion, it's already on the table.
Got you. Thank you.
Okay, so we will go ahead and vote on on Mr. Welch's motion to amend Mr. Galbraith's amendment right now, okay?
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. So we just approved the amendment to Mr. Galbraith's, and now we are back to Mr. Galbraith's motion. I'm sorry, as amended. Yes, yes.
Madam Chair, do you know if there's any more discussion?
Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So relative, I guess I'll make my point on relative to the original amendment here as modified. I'm not going to vote in favor of it because I am of the agreement that we've gotten assurances from our staff, from our superintendent, and it's really not necessary for us to document that in our motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So what we will be voting on right now is the original amendment that states, therefore, staff will neither require training, require teachers to use, nor restrict teachers from using the SEL components of the curriculum.
The amendment as amended.
The amendment as amended, Ms. Cleveland.
So we just approved what Eric did, which is basically that.
We amended the language amendment,
So now we're going
editorial. Now we'll amend. Correct.
So,
But you amended that first approval that you did, you just amended it with those words that were given by Eric.
okay.
So now you're back on the motion that he recommended.
Okay. So,
As amended.
Right.
not,
Correct.
not, it's one vote to hold, thank you.
That's correct.
Approve the whole thing.
I would say it was
Thank you.
editorial.
And Mr.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Cook, if I'm not mistaken, after this vote, there will have to be a final vote for the underlying motion as amended.
Correct.
Ms. Cleveland, did you have another follow-up question? Okay, yeah, we were voting on the editorial changes to Mr. Galbraith's. Okay, sure. Mr. Beasley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think my question was answered.
Okay.
So we're voting 2 more times after this?
We are.
current vote.
We will vote
Correct.
for the amendment right now, once discussion is concluded. Then we will follow up and vote on the recommendation.
As amended, right?
As amended. You bet. That's right. Okay. And now we are to Mr. Brown.
So would it be useful to read the entire amendment now that that last sentence has been amended? So that everybody's clear on all of the verbiage that we're voting on?
This is what we are, so we are voting right now to accept the amendment Mr. Galbraith put forward. I move to accept the Math Curriculum Committee's recommendation for K-5 of McGraw-Hill with the understanding that the committee did not evaluate the alignment of social and emotional learning, SEL, components of their curriculum to the Tennessee state standards. Therefore, staff will neither require training, require teachers to use, nor restrict teachers from using the SEL components of the curriculum. Voting yes means you approve the adoption of the math textbook recommendation with this amendment added. Okay? If no further discussion, we will. Oh, point of order. Yes, Mr. Wimberly.
Have we had a vote on
If
revised amendment?
yes. Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we just approved that. Yes. No, that's on the revised.
We're about to vote on
We're
the-
about to.
we're about
we
to vote on the
voted
revised
for-
amendment.
We were voted for the editorial revisions. We voted for that, and that was approved. Now we're voting for. Yes. Yes. Mr. Brown.
So this will be the vote on Jay's amendment, and then we will vote on the original recommendation for adopting the textbooks.
Yes. Is that what I'm sorry, Mr. Wimberly. I don't know if that's what you were asking. Okay. 2 more votes on this topic. Okay. This is to adopt Mr. Galbraith's motion to amend.
Madam Chair, based on the legislative history of your most recent amendment to the amendment, I do recommend approval of this amendment.
Okay. Okay. With Mr. Golden's recommendation, let's cast our votes.
Your vote is 8 yes, 4 no.
So the amendment did pass. The motion did pass. Now we are going to vote on the approval of the Textbook Adoption Committee's recommendation for math textbooks with the amendment that was just passed. Okay? If no discussion, we'll cast our votes.
Recommend approval.
Thank you.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. That motion and the approval adopted the textbooks for math for next year. Okay. And our next agenda item is approval of the 2023-2024 high school courses.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have before you a request for the annual high school course approval. Do recommend approval.
Thank you. Any discussion? Oh, a motion, please. Thank you. Mr. Welch and Mr. Wimberly seconds. Any discussion? Okay, we can move to a vote.
Vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. That was approval for the 2023-2024 high school courses. And the final item on the agenda is approval of the 2023-24 special course application.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In addition to those 3 courses you just approved, Ancient History Honors, AP Pre-Calculus, and Math Reasoning for Decision Making, we do have a request for renewed special courses, which includes Leadership, Abnormal Psychology Honors, and Music Industry Audio Production 1, 2, and 3. Just as a reminder, the Audio Production 1, 2, and 3 are at Renaissance High School for a focus area for graduation option for students. Recommend approval.
Thank you. Do we have a motion? Ms. Clements, and a second from Mr. Welch. Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, let's cast our votes.
Your vote is 12 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. That motion passed for the approval of the 2023-24 special course application. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.